Hello, wilds of the internet. Wanted to share a couple of quick thoughts with you because I've had some interesting conversations today and this week with potential clients that really highlighted a big freaking problem out there. And you might notice that there are two camps of people. Yeah, one group of people will do everything they can to fight for their limitations, right? There's a whole group of people that'll focus most of their time, most of their energy on I can't do this. I don't have that. It's like they're clinging to some sense of insufficiency. And it's a big freaking problem. Because when you cling to the idea and the identity of insufficiency, of not being enough, not knowing enough, having enough, doing enough, when you identify more with those limitations than with where you want to go, what you want to become, who you want to be, what you want to do, what you want to have, that's why you're stuck. Like if you're stuck, it's really worth looking at, am I making excuses for my limitations? Am I rationalizing limitations, justifying them? Am I arguing on behalf of them? It's an insidious problem. And so there's one way we might really look at this. So I mentioned in the little text thing, there's this quack physicist, yeah? So the guy I'm talking about, his name is Moshe Feldenkrais. I know a lot of you guys watching this now have probably heard of him. Maybe you're even practitioners. You've at least explored some of the work. And he has this really potent line at the start of one of his books. We act in accordance with our self-image. So what he means by that is that you have this internal concept of yourself. When he says self-image, he's talking about both the internal narrative of what kind of person you are relative to your life history, relative to how you grow up, where you were raised, like the geographic and the temporal factors of you as a person. But then he's also talking about the neurological map of the body that resides within a couple of different places in the brain. So when you mesh these two things together, you get the self-image, right? It's the neurobiological map of your body in space. How you walk and talk and sit and stand and engage in the world. How you carry yourself. How you present yourself. That's one part of it. The other part, more in line with the psychotherapeutic tradition, is the internal narrative, right? And any good story, any internal narrative, has a few key elements, right? First and foremost is that it's got to go somewhere. A story without a plot, a story without a sense of direction, we don't read that story, right? There's no point to it. So a good story must have a sense of direction. If you're feeling lost and aimless and like caught in the mess of things, that's why you're not going anywhere. You don't have your sights set on something. You don't have a good idea of how you want this story to wrap up in a neat little bow. Yeah? So that's one big part. The other big part is that a story needs a sense of bearability. You need to be able to endure whatever is happening. Like maybe your life is a total shit show mess. Maybe you're in such a big upheaval of a transition that you can't tell up from down and left from right. Fine. As long as you find some means to bear through it, to endure that story, you're going to make it through. Yeah? If you can see whatever it is that you're up against, you can cope with it. If it were really too big for you to deal with, you would not be able to perceive that. Seriously, think of all of the people who've repressed and blocked out all sorts of things. Like, if what you were up against were too big for you to handle, you wouldn't be able to see it in front of you. It would break you. It would crush you. You would stick your head in the sand entirely. But the fact that it's bugging you, the fact that it's in your awareness and it's got you like racking your brain trying to figure out what to do with it, that means you can bear it. You're not screwed. It just means you haven't figured out the resources within yourself or the resources outside of yourself to make it through in the way that you would like to make it through. So it's really important to hold that in mind as well. Now, the third big thing that a good story needs as we look at the self-image here is a sense of cohesion. There must be a sense of all of these pieces tying together. But the problem that a lot of people run into is that they look around their lives, they look at the world out there, which is a neurotic world. It's a fragmented world. It's so built on separation and compartmentalization. No wonder people feel so internally disjointed too. They can't make heads and tails of what they think, what they feel, how they should act, their role in society. They're split, right? And it starts fundamentally with that mind-body split. We've got that huge Cartesian error that says these are separate things, body and mind. It's just not true. You've probably heard me make the point before, like if you began your life as a single fertilized cell, when do you think you split off into a mind and a body? It's just not the case. It's implicitly false to think that we're separated. Like our fundamental state is wholeness. Our fundamental state is sufficiency, and it's only through these separations, this rift that we make within ourselves, this rift that we make in our relationships, these rifts that we make out in the world. That's where things get into a mess, yeah? So anyway, all of that to say that this is going on in the background of your self-image, right? It's this story that you make about yourself, and it's this map that you have within yourself. So we act in accordance with our neurological maps and with this internal narrative. You cannot act in any other way. If you do, it feels disjointed, it feels incongruent, it creates an energetic expenditure, a pull away from something, yeah? Hey Dan, good to see you here. Dan Nick Bar Gilchrist. That's a lot of names. But anyway, I digress. So we act in accordance with this self-image, yeah? Think, for example, if you think of yourself as a good person, you don't steal in all likelihood. You don't murder people. It's just not a part of your self-concept. Doing so would be so totally incongruent of the type of person you see yourself to be. It's like you see yourself as all of this over here, and murder would be way the frick up there. Like it's too much for you to bear. It's too much for you to handle. So you don't act in that way. Now, of course, there are some good things, right? You don't walk around murdering people. But there are also some bad things associated with that, because there's a whole world of other stuff that you don't pursue, because you don't have it as a part of your self-image that people like me can do this. For a lot of people, I coach a lot of people in the embodiment world, the movement world. A part of their self-concept is that I'm not a good person if I charge a lot for my services. Like they undercharge because part of their self-concept is it is bad to make X amount of dollars, right? To make $100,000. I can't do that. That's not like my family's, no one in my family's ever done that. I can't do that. Who am I to do that? So they undercharge, and go figure, they under-earn as well. So maybe you're not making enough money, and that's probably directly linked to your self-image. Maybe you aren't presenting yourself with the sort of charisma, the confidence, the certainty that you could. That's also linked to your self-image. Maybe you inhibit your expression. You say, I can't say that. Like, ooh, I might poke some buttons. Like, I might get in trouble. Like, I'm not qualified to say that. Who freaking cares? But again, the reason why you don't do that inhibition comes from the fact that you perceive that thing you're trying to say as so far outside your self-concept that you can't fathom you doing that. So we act in accordance with our self-image, and it makes perfect survival sense to fight for your limitations, yeah? If your sense of self is undermined, if like the rug gets pulled out from under you, you don't know up from down, you don't know where you stand. So of course you hunker down and you protect that, right? The challenge is knowing when to intelligently fight for those limitations, when to intelligently hunker down into your self-concept, and when to push the edges of that, right? It's not an issue necessarily to fight for your limitations unless you do it compulsively, without awareness of the fact that you're doing it. Now, a really easy example, I just hopped off the phone with this guy who has incredible aspirations to become a truly transformational leader in his community, yeah? And as soon as I asked him, well, would you like some help with this? Like, this is a big change you're talking about. Would you like some support? Before he answered yes or no, he went on this whole 10-minute long story about money and this and that. And so I just asked him, I was like, hey, I don't know if you're aware of this, but all I asked was, would you like some support? And frankly, I'm not interested in your suffering. I'm not interested in your limitations, but you made a pretty compelling case about why you can't make a change. And you didn't actually even answer the question, would you like some support? And he had to take a moment and step back because he was totally unaware that that's what he had done. It was so deeply grooved within his self-concept, this sense of his limitation, that he wasn't able to think creatively about how he could make it work. So this guy, he left the conversation with all sorts of ideas, this kind of creative fire lit of like, wow, how can I make it work? Like he was flexing his creative muscle rather than hunkering down into his sense of how small he was. You do the same thing in myriad ways throughout the day. You fight for your own sense of smallness. And it's not like a bad thing. Maybe that's working for you. Maybe that's keeping you safe. Like, it's really worth giving credit where credit is due. Those patterns, they got you here. These tendencies of yours, they led you to this point, yeah? But it's worth questioning, are they working for you now or not? That's the big challenge. So, if they're working for you and you're getting what you want in life, keep at it. There's no reason it would be stupid to change if things are working for you. But if they're not, it really begs the question, why aren't you making the kind of progress that you say you want to make? Now, I'll tell you the main reason, the number one reason, is that it hasn't become an essential part of your self-image to make this change. The moment that your healing becomes essential is the moment that you start healing. The moment that your growth becomes an essential part of who you are is the moment you start growing. Now, this is a big freaking shakeup for a person's self-image. Like, this is turbulent. It's an upheaval, right? Because what this means is that you have to let go of some of the attachment of your habitual ways of doing and thinking and acting and speaking. You have to soften some of the clinginess to that, right? We have to let go of our sense of our own smallness, our sense of our own limitations. We have to create a little breathing room at that point. And then we have to make the very courageous step of identifying more with who we want to be and where we want to go than with who we have been and where we have been, yeah? There's always this back and forth pull between your habits and your future, between your comfort and your growth. Like, we can't have both. And it's not to say we totally uproot ourselves as we move forward into this change, but it is to say that we can let go of the things that don't work for us if we're aware of the fact that they're not working for us, and we have the courage to really let these things go. Like, make no mistake, healing, growth, development, these are courageous acts. They're forward thinking, they're creative, they're implicitly creative. And so it makes total sense that they cause some anxiety, right? There's a level of anxiety attendant with any significant change. It's built into the change. The reason why you can become so anxious on the way toward growth and healing and development is because you don't know how it's going to go. That's the most anxiety-provoking thing there is not knowing, yeah? If you knew exactly how it were going to turn out, it wouldn't be a significant change. But all of the biggest transitions, like the wildest upheavals of our lives, they have anxiety built into them because we don't know how it's going to go. But that's really where we claim our creativity, our human dignity, our agency, and our autonomy. It's where we learn how to chart our own course. It's through that perpetual dance with uncertainty. If it's worth doing, you don't know how it's going to go. If I look at what I'm doing now, professionally, career-wise, compared to when I started this, I wouldn't have been able to predict it at all. The good and the bad. I would have no idea what was going to come on this journey. But it's only through getting comfortable with that discomfort, with the courage to act in the face of uncertainty and imperfect understanding, that's what's going to make the significant changes you're looking for. So the only reason likely that you haven't made the kind of progress you want to make is that future you, that future you depends on this, yeah? Depends on healing and growing and developing and questioning and churning through it until that becomes an essential part of your self-image, until that willingness, that receptivity to encounter the unknown, until it becomes essential, of course you'll plateau. And of course you'll stay stuck and feel stagnant and get this itch that something could be different. There's no other way for it to be. Like, if you've been plateauing, if you've felt like you're spinning your wheels, it's because something about that change hasn't become essential for you. What's been essential for you is maintaining the security of your habits, the security of knowing how everything's going to go in every little detail. So when you can let go of that and maintain your composure in the face of that uncertainty, that's when you really start to make moves. But again, that is a courageous act. That opens you up to all sorts of existential angst and anxiety and uncertainty and all of this stuff that we spin our wheels with. And it's when those feelings come up, those like dragons that, oh geez, I don't know how it's going to go. That's when most people shrink back into themselves. That's when they start to fight for their limitations. And it's why they stay stuck and frustrated. Yeah? Again, it's courageous to pursue what you could be with as much, if not more, gusto than with what you have been. Yeah? That's why the hero's journey is so compelling. That's why it's in every culture's mythological underpinning, right? We value heroes because they do the things that most people can't or won't. That's just the truth of it. So until you're willing to confront the things that you previously couldn't do or wouldn't do, until you're willing to face that with a certain level of courage and composure and willingness to confront the unknown, well, yeah, you're going to stay as you have been. But I told this guy on the call just now, there's a very different thing that happens when a change is forced on you compared to when you willingly confront it. As soon as we willingly confront a challenge or a fear, we operate from an entirely different neurobiological pathway. Like you trigger different neurological and hormonal cascades when you willingly confront a challenge as opposed to when it is thrown on you. And make no mistake, that challenge is going to ram into you at some point. You can either take a step toward it, cultivate that heroic sense of self, that level of courage. You can cultivate the sense of who you wish you could be and take a step toward that challenge. Or you can wait 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, and it's going to smack into you at a certain point. Like that's the norm, is letting the world come to meet you. And believe me, the world's big. If you wait for the world to come meet you in some way, it's going to squash you. Look at like the midlife crisis phenomenon. People accumulate so much baggage, so much attachment to their own sense of comfort and internal security. They're so afraid of the unknown that they hunker down. And then when eventually the world smushes them, it breaks some people. That's the midlife crisis. They uproot themselves entirely and throw out everything they've built. It's not a pretty picture. Now, if you willingly confront the unknown and the discomfort and all of that, you operate from a very different place. Like it's an entirely different qualitative sense of that contact, right? If the world squishes you, you are helpless, you are victim, you are again like reinforcing all of the bullshit that no one wants to live their lives from that place. No one wants to be a victim. No one wants that, but we settle for that so often because we're afraid of the power inherent in taking a stand for these things, right? So if you willingly confront this, if you make it a part of your self-image to act courageously, to confront the unknown, to find a sense of ground, to make it an essential part of who you are, to grow, you will be dazzled by what you can come up with. So I left the guy with a challenge. He asked like, well, how long is it, like, can I have a couple of weeks to do this? Like, I want to make this happen. I need to put some things together to make it work. And I was like, tell you what, I'll give you 24 hours. You put together this much in 24 hours and we will hold this spot for you for however long you want. And he loved it. It's like having the challenge there, having the constraint in place really lit a fire under him. So you might ask yourself, if there's something you've been kind of wanting or wishing for so long you haven't had it, what can you do to raise the stakes for yourself? Like, we rise to the level of the challenge that we give ourselves, yeah? Heroes become heroic by going out and slaying dragons. That's what they do. So if you haven't gotten something that you've been talking about for years, if there's a goal you've had in mind, if there's a plateau you've been stuck at for years, an easy way to break out of that rut is raise the stakes for yourself. Go for something bigger. Seriously. Like, what would 10x look like for you? I know a lot of people who are spinning their wheels on, income. I mentioned that earlier. I mentor a lot of people in the movement or the embodiment space around their own practices. And they get stuck at this level. It's like, well, I've been, I want to go from 40,000 to 50,000, or I want to go from, 500,000 to like 550,000, like a little bit more. Why go for the incremental stuff? There's nothing inspiring about an incremental change. Like, yeah, it's a little bit better. But if you really want to inspire like massive action and see something drastically different for yourself, go for the exponential shift. Go for the biggest thing you can conceive of. Like, the way we make the most change is like, you pick up the heaviest load you can carry, you carry it as far as you possibly can, you set it down, and you recuperate, yeah? So go for the biggest thing you can possibly imagine tackling. And before running wildly at it, like before doing the Don Quixote thing and just like charging at windmills, like, make sure you're well-resourced. Make sure you are grounded in an accurate view of yourself, an accurate view of your capabilities. Odds are good you're selling yourself short. I meet very few people who are overly inflated in their sense of themselves. Very few. I mean, I can count on a couple of hands the number of people I've met who have like an absurdly exaggerated sense of self. Most people are squashed to some degree. They're actually blind to what they're capable of. It's the truth of it. Blame the educational system, blame whatever the hell you want, your parents, your culture. I don't care what you blame. I'm not particularly interested in what you blame for it. The real interest is like, where do you want to end up and what are you willing to do to get there? That's what it comes down to. Again, when your healing becomes essential to who you are, that is when you start healing. Believe me, like, I've lived it. For the longest time, I was content to suffer with like day-to-day aches and pains, and I was just like, well, maybe you just have to tough it out. Maybe this is what life is. And it wasn't until I said like, fuck that bullshit, no, that's when I really started to heal. And like, that's when my quality of movement went through the roof, because it became an essential part of who I am. You look downstairs in my house, like you look around my office, there's no furniture here, because moving more throughout the day is essential to who I am. That is a key part of who I was committed to becoming. So I wove it into my life. Like, I remember the decision to throw out all of my furniture. It was 6-7 years ago, maybe. But I remember the decision to say, no, that like, this isn't going to work. This isn't going to do it. I can't be a couch-shaped person. I can't be a chair-shaped person. So I got rid of it. That was total commitment for me. That was like a line in the sand. And when you can make a line in the sand decision like that, when you really raise the stakes for yourself, you'll be amazed by what you can come up with. It's why when someone's asking to work with me, I get a sense of their background, what they're struggling with, sure, but I'm really not interested in the story of the limitations. I'm interested more in where you want to go, who you want to become, what you want to aim for, what kind of change you want to make in the world. Like, the people that come to work with me are they want to do some big freaking stuff, but they can't get out of their own way. So that's what I'm interested in, is like the vision that they have for themselves. And then, we raise the stakes. It's like, okay, you've settled for this for so long. If you look around at the life you're living right now, this is good enough. This is probably like a step above survival mode, getting by. Like, seriously, if I look around in here, my office is a little bit of a mess right now because I've kind of settled for that. I've got like this is good enough, I can keep doing what I'm going to do, but like, truth be told, I don't want it to look like this. I've got 4 stacks of books I can look at. If I just do this, I need to put them back on the shelves. But I've settled for having a messy office, yeah? So if you look around at the quality of movement you have, if you look around at the income you have, if you look around at the impact that you're having, odds are good you've got just enough. You've got good enough to get by. But it is not all that you're capable of. Now, it's not to say that we're going to like get 100% of your potential. The thing about potential, the thing about the ideal, is that you will never get it. You'll never mobilize 100% of your potential. Anyone who sells, like, if you're scrolling through Facebook and you see these things that I see that are like, you're going to reach your fullest potential, and but like, it's bullshit. It's just not true. We operate from limits. Limits are a part of the world, yeah? It's knowing how to operate within those limits and do so in a way that's pleasurable, that's satisfying, that's meaningful. That's what it's all about. Like, number one limit, if anyone says, like, you're going to reach your fullest potential, like, blah, blah, blah. And I was guilty of this when I got caught up in the rah-rah motivational bullshit of, like, no limits, you're going to transcend them. It's like, transcend death. Good freaking luck. That's limit number 1. You're going to die at a certain point. Now, what you do in between now and when you die, that's where the magic happens. That's where your creativity comes into play. That's where You have a say in how things go. But you're going to die. That's the biggest freaking limit. Now, the thing I've been most curious about lately is, it struck me, maybe it's a morbid thought, but I think it's worth considering what the most important moment of a person's life is. And for me, I can't help but shake the feeling that the most important moment of a person's life is that last infinitely long moment before they die. Because it's in that moment where everything really is revealed, where either you're full of regret over all the stuff that could have been, right? There's that quote, like, hell is when you're at that point and you come face to face with the person you could have been and all the things you could have done, right? That's a hellish hell. And in that last infinitely long moment, if it's full of regret over what could have been and what you could have done and what you should have said and all of this, what a miserable way to die. That's hell, yeah? But wouldn't heaven be something like the perfect sense of composure, the perfect state of equanimity and receptivity in your last waking moments? Wouldn't that be heaven? Like, in that last infinitely long moment, wouldn't it be the sense of, I made something of all of this. I did not hold myself back any more than I needed to over the course of my life. I did something meaningful. I made something that can outlive me. That's freaking immortality. If you can make something that outlives you, right? Like a business, a work of art, a legacy, right? That's immortality. That's what we should be chasing, is all of the stuff beyond ourselves that we could achieve if we could just get out of our own way. If we could stop holding ourselves back. Like, I truly do believe the natural state of things is wholeness. It's sufficiency. It is flow. It's our generative capacity as leaders. But we tamp that down for so long, and I frankly think it's bullshit. It's tiring. It's not how I want to live my life. Maybe it's not how you want to live yours. I don't know. So if you're curious to actually do something more than talk about these ideas or listen to them, think about them too. Like, those are all nice things to do. I would encourage you to act on them in some way. Like, really, look at everything we've talked about, come up with one insight you've had, and then think about what's one action I'm going to take based on that insight. Now, if you'd like some help with it, this isn't something you have to go alone. This is something that I work with people on every single day. Like, I was talking to the guy earlier, I was like, look, what you call a miracle, I call Tuesday. Like, it's what I do at this point. So if you're interested in getting some support along the way, what I'd recommend is book a call with me. We'll set aside 45 minutes, maybe an hour and a half if we're having fun with it, and we'll suss this out. And you'll get a really clear sense of what your limits actually are. What are the things that you've settled for, that you've tolerated for so long? And it's not going to be comfortable, but we'll get really clear on what it's costing you to stay that way. Now, I say it's not going to be comfortable because some people come into these calls thinking that it's going to be all feel good, whatever, and it's just not. Like, again, growth isn't necessarily a comfortable process. Healing takes courage. Like, it's not all rosy along the way. I'd be lying to you if I said it was, right? It takes real courage to heal and to grow. So don't come in expecting a comfortable conversation. If you're looking for comfort, this is not the... You may as well unlike this page and go do whatever. Look at more whatever the hell people look at for comfort. I don't know. But it's not the place for you. It's not that it's good or bad. It's just that's not what I'm about. That's not how I operate. What I'm interested in is what you could do if you could actually get out of your own way. So that's really the more important part of what this conversation will be. It'll be really bringing some clarity to what could you do if you were free from those limitations. If you weren't so clinging to the little sense of yourself, like who would you be if you could start to mobilize more of yourself, if you could stop inhibiting yourself, if you could express yourself freely? What would you do with that? Yeah. So we'll talk about that. We'll explore that. And I'll be really honest with you as we go through it. My goal, I was meeting with a mentor of mine earlier in this week, and he said, I was looking at your website a bit, and it's really clear, like, you're all about bringing people into the cauldron. And I was just like, yeah, that's a good way to think of it. I love that. I might steal it. But yeah, this conversation, it's a cauldron of some sort. We're going to cook down all of this little sense of your own limitations, all the narrow perceptions, all the things you've settled for. We're going to boil all that down. And we're going to see what we can cook up from you as we go through it. Yeah, and as I said, I will be totally honest with you. If it is something that I can help you with, and that I'm frankly excited to help you with, I don't want to just settle for like, yeah, I could help that. Like, if you're after something that really helps me feel excited to help you, I'll let you know. And I'll tell you what that looks like. But seriously, like, if I get a sense that you would be better served elsewhere, either I can't help you or I'm not particularly interested in it, I'll let you know that too. I mean, again, no judgment, no harm, no foul, whatever. It's just not a good fit for everybody. And believe me, I am pretty blunt about it if it's not a good fit, but I will help you figure out the right resources and point you in the right direction. So if that's something you're interested in, I will put a link in the comments underneath this, link to my calendar. You can book a call. And whether we continue together or not doesn't frankly matter too much, but there's some real value in coming face to face with and cultivating some awareness of your own habitual ways of thinking and doing. It's only through awareness that we actually get a choice in the matter. And it's only through that choice that we can make a change. So if there's a change that you want to make, it's going to take some different choices. And in order to make those choices, it's going to take some awareness. So again, let's talk it over. Like, there's truly nothing to lose other than, well, there's a lot to lose. There's your sense of comfort. There's your sense of smallness. There's, the excuses maybe you've been making. Like, you could lose all of those things. And frankly, I don't think that would be a bad thing. And I imagine you don't think so either. Or else you probably wouldn't still be watching this. So anyhow, I'll put that below. Hope this has been useful for you. It's been a lot of fun for me just talking through it. So with that, take care, and we'll talk soon.